One of the most common concerns with investing in the stock market is the feeling that you don't have enough money to make a difference. And that becomes more of a concern when you're investing in dividend stocks for the purpose of passive income. On top of that, when you consider that the average monthly expense for an American is a little over $6,000, then the idea of living off that passive income feels like it's impossible. But what's just as important as how much you're investing into the stock market is what exactly you're investing into. And in this video, I'm going to share with you guys how long it would take to make $1,000 a month in passive income from these 3 different dividend stocks while investing just $30 a week. Of course, $1,000 is not an average monthly expense, but it'll probably pay a car note and then some. Now, the 3 different positions I'm going to talk about are a high yield, a stock that has a higher yield than most, typically at about 5% or more, high growth, a position that focuses more on long-term profit growth, and a hybrid of the 2. As we go along, you'll notice the pros and cons of each and how they'll affect your money in the long term. The high yielding stocks and ETFs are going to be the most attractive for low income investors looking for a lot of passive income in a small amount of time. But with most positions with a high dividend yield, you have a better chance of that company sacrificing a lot of its potential for long-term profit. And there's a plethora of reasons that could happen, including the company doesn't reinvest as much money into itself, and instead it takes that money and just pays it back to the shareholders in form of dividends. One example of a high dividend stock, one we're going to talk about today, is Verizon. Now, when you first look at Verizon, you'll see that they're having a pretty solid year, especially with the company increasing its share price by over 23% in the past 12 months. But when you go a little bit further, you'll see that in the past 5 years, the stock has dropped by over 25% or a little over 5% per year on average. Despite its long-term downtrend in its share price, its dividend yield is what makes it very attractive to most low-income investors. Honestly, it makes it attractive to most dividend investors in general. Verizon currently sits at a dividend yield of 6.68%, which means shareholders will bring in about $2.66 per share per year in dividends. And its dividend payout history is pretty solid, consistently paying and increasing its dividend payouts every year for the past 19 years. So this does make it a pretty good position to invest into, especially for its long-term dividend growth or its 5-year dividend CAGR, which is the compound annual growth rate. With that being said, I'm going to use a dividend calculator on marketbeat.com to determine how long it would take me investing in Verizon to make $1,000 per month in dividends with investing only $30 per week. And I'm just going to use Verizon as an example to show you guys what I'm typing in and why. For starters, I'll put the number of shares at $0 because we're assuming we're going just from the first $30 investment, and the annual contribution of $1,560, or again $30 a week. Then I'll use Seeking Alpha to find the dividend yield, the annual dividend increase, which I just use a 5-year dividend CAGR, and the annual share price increase, or a year average from the 5-year share price history. When it comes to Verizon, it would take me a little under 17 years to make over $13,000 per year in dividends, bringing me home about $1,150 per month. And it will also give 105% total return, which is the share price return after reinvesting those dividends. Honestly, not bad at all, but just as a little teaser, this is actually the lowest total return out of these 3 different positions. And here are a couple of alternatives you can put in for a high dividend stock. One is QYOD. It currently has a super high dividend yield of 12.51%, but unfortunately it does have a history of negative share price growth and a negative dividend CAGR, which means every year its share price and the amount of money you're making per month is slowly decreasing. And with QYOD, you're making about $13,000 within 21 years. Another option is Altria, ticker symbol MO. It has a 7.94% yield, and it actually has a higher total return and positive growth than both stocks, including Verizon Wireless, and it would take 19 years to hit $12,000 per year. So not bad at all. Most of the high growth positions that I've seen as I started investing tend to sacrifice a high dividend yield and instead give long-term investors the opportunity to make a lot of money in profits over a long period of time. But despite having a lower initial dividend yield, having a history of consistently making positive returns does give it more room to have a higher dividend CAGR, or consistently increasing its dividend yield over a period of time. And a high growth stock that comes in mind for me is Broadcom. The downside of Broadcom is that it currently has a 1.48% dividend yield, which means it currently pays only $2.10 per year per share, which is a bit on the opposite end of the spectrum when you compare it to Verizon. But on the plus side, it's definitely an upgrade when it comes to its share price history, including a 60% growth in the past 12 months and a ridiculous 440% growth over the past 5 years. What's even cooler is that despite its low dividend yield, it has a 5-year dividend growth growth rate that's almost 16%, which has helped the dividend grow from as low as 10 cents per share within the past 13 years. Finding out how long it would take to make $1,000 per month in dividends from Broadcom was pretty interesting, especially when you consider its low dividend yield, but yet its high dividend growth rate. We get to about $13,000 in 42 years, meaning we'll hit about $12,000 in a little over 41 years. But you can also see how the total return potential is, well, ridiculous. I emphasize that because I don't know what's the possibility of Broadcom actually increasing its share price for 80% per year for the next few years, but had I invested into it 5 years ago, that's exactly what would have happened. But regardless, it takes about 20 years longer to hit that mark in comparison to Verizon. One alternative to a high growth stock is Costco. It has a very low dividend yield of 0.57%. but it does have a 17% dividend CAGR. And as you can see, it would just take a very, very long time for it to hit $1,000 per month. Same thing goes with Apple. It has an even lower dividend yield of 0.48%, which means it's gonna take even longer to hit that point. So yet again, with these types of positions, if you wanna hit it sooner, you gotta invest a bit more, but you're definitely going to reap the benefits when it comes to total returns. I feel like the goal for most of us that invest is to have a portfolio that does a healthy combination of providing long-term dividend growth and providing long-term overall profit growth. And one very popular hybrid type of position is an ETF called SCHD. SCHD contains companies such as Lockheed Martin, Coca-Cola, and other companies that have a history of consistently paying dividends for at least 10 years. That consistency helps explain its consistent dividend payout history grown to a current yield of 3.59% and its consistent increase of their share price, which is at over 50% for the past 5 years, including almost 10% for this year so far. So with SCHD, if we have the same criteria as the other two positions, it would take 23 years to build a portfolio that pays $1,000 per month in passive income. But with that, you're also getting a 566% total return over that same period of time. It does put it at a slower pace towards $1,000 a month than Verizon, but it's going to give you a higher return than Verizon. So that puts it right in the middle when we compare these three different positions. One great alternative for a hybrid position is Kroger. Kroger currently has a 2.36% yield, and it also has a 15.68% compound annual growth rate, which is great. And then over the past 5 years, its share price has increased by 130%. And overall, it would take about 30 years to hit roughly $13,000 in dividends. So definitely a healthy combination of the two. Every type of dividend stock is going to have its pros and cons, and hopefully these three different positions gave you a little bit of an example and why. But that's why it's pretty important to consider having a portfolio that has a healthy amount of both. You want to have a little bit of hybrid stocks and then a little bit of stocks that focus more on your monthly or quarterly dividend payouts, and then some other stocks that focus mostly on bringing you as much money as they can from their profit growth. That's definitely the goal for my portfolio, something I'm working on to this day. But so far, my portfolio has done pretty well for me, even though July was a pretty intense month in the stock market. But as far as growth and dividends, it did pretty well. And I'll talk more about that in this video, so hopefully you guys take some time to watch that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video as well. And until next time, as always, take care.